We're gonna get going, everybody.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, sir.
Mr. Curie?
Here.
Mr. Boga?
Here.
Mr. Brodsky?
Here.
Mr. Coyne?
Present.
Mr. Jalea?
Here.
Mr. Ford?
Here.
Mr. Kane?
Here.
Mr. Karam?
Here.
Mr. Motolo?
Here.
And Ms. Sisson.
Thank you. You have in your packet the July 18, 2016 draft minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion.
A second?
Second.
Any comments, discussion, corrections? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the resolution award of construction contract for Washington Street, Utica water main repairs. Dick?
Mr. Delia. Thank you. The capital committee met actually at 4:30 this afternoon to consider this project, and it, after we reviewed the bids, did reach consensus to bring the project to the full board for your consideration. The work involves a small amount of water main work, actually north of the auditorium, north of the main line railroad tracks in two locations. Some of our lines run across the tracks, used to serve the old National Grid site in the Harbor Point area there. We've been doing quite a bit of work out there to prepare and support the city's eventual redevelopment of the Harbor Point site. This work is in two locations, involves a very small amount of water main replacement and some replacement of hydrants, valves, and a master meter that serves some of the industry's valve manufacturing and international paper. We elected to put it out for bid for contractors to do the work because we've encountered contaminated soils in that area before. No guarantee, but it's a good chance that we would hit that. And also we're working on it across railroad tracks and on and near private land. So the bids, we did receive 3 bids. It was publicly bid in the paper. Our low bid was from Stevener's Backhoe Service in Marcy at $32,775. Our second bid was Daxco Pipeline. They're currently doing a project for us up at the water plant at $37,544. And we did have a third bid from CCI Companies, which is doing some of the city CSO work right now at a little over $53,000. But we have worked with Stevener in the past. They meet the schedules, do quality work, and we would recommend award to them. One point I do want to make is that the Water Authority will be providing all of the water main materials, the meter, the hydrants, valves, parts like that from our inventory. So that's not included in this bid. And we also work very closely with the contractor on these types of projects to make sure that they're done in accordance with all of our requirements. But we would recommend that the board award to Stevener.
I have a question. Given the fact that such a discrepancy between the 50 and the 32, and given the fact that CCI is a really good outfit, do you have any concerns that maybe he's possibly underbidding?
No, Stevener's done work very competitively for us in the past. He's a sole proprietor. I think CCI is in the area and working, and so they put a number in on it.
Oh, okay.
We've worked very well with CCI. They've gone after jobs and then been low bids for us before. They're actually doing the Wers Ave project in Utica to extend. They actually have water main under that project for the city.
It sounds like they just threw in a bid.
May have, bigger
do that
company.
sometimes. They do
These
that
other two companies are more or less sole proprietors with small crews, do one job at a time, get it done and go on, so. No qualms at all about Stevener or any of the three.
Good by me.
Anybody else? Any questions? Move the motion as presented, Bruce. Second, thanks, Vince. Any further discussion regarding this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Next, approval of the quarterly investment statement for the second quarter ending 6/30/2016, and that's in the miscellaneous tab of your packet.
Yes.
Jim?
Yes. As required under public authorities law, we are obligated to provide you on a quarterly basis the statement of investments that we have. So this is the second quarter of the year. So you got the first quarter in the first column, second quarter in the second column, showing the balances and the income earned on these investments and the expenses. Biggest change between the March 31st and June 30th, the 2006 and the 2012 sinking funds, we had made payments of debt service April 1 on those, so you can see the balances have been building up and then they go down. In addition, there's also the 2015 project fund. We're using those funds for existing capital projects, so we're drawing down from those. So it's normal, that's what happens, and we continue to invest when we're able to. Not worrying a lot.
The bonds, we're required to keep that. I mean, it's not something we opt to do, right? I mean,
Pardon me?
we're required to do this because of the
Yeah,
bonding.
yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
I'll move it. Second. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Jim, anything on the financial report?
I did ask Jim to prepare a couple of explanations for the board, so I know I brought it with me.
Okay. With the monthly financial report that you have, just very quickly, we're down a little in consumption. Year to date, we were up before, but we've kind of dipped down. We're hoping that reverses. Again, it goes up and down as months go on. We're still above budget regarding water sales, and our cash flow is favorable. We're building that up because we have some big payments coming up with retirement, which I'll get into in a second, and also chemical costs continue. We have GAC payments, our granulated activated carbon payments that go out during the summer months. So it's good that we have positive cash flow. Yes, so continuing. Any questions on that?
The consumption is down because it's been a wet summer, I mean.
Yeah, it has been wetter than normal, but depends on what part of the area that we're in that we build off of, so it tends to go up and down, fluctuate, but this past year, we were actually up in consumption overall. And I will add, I don't know if Bruce had mentioned the last meeting, I wasn't here, but we had finalized our audit for the year, our annual financial report, so I'll get you a copy of that as soon as we have them reproduced. It's up on the website. But in there, we have a 10-year table that shows consumption over the 10-year period, and more recently, the consumption in 2015 actually was up from 2014. So we're hoping that that downward trend has tapered off and gone the other way. Yes, so Bruce asked me to provide some information for you. What do you think, Bruce? What do you want to do first? Unrestricted cash?
Yeah, do the easy one first.
Easy one first. Okay, here's a handout. We're showing
I had noticed in the report that unrestricted cash has been changing. So I asked him to give us a chart for the last 5 years.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
Right, so this is our unrestricted cash over a 5-year period plus year to date. So moving from right to left. I did left and right, but I felt as though most current being to the left. So that shows you where we're at in July. We're close to $7.8 million. And that's cash that we've built up over the years. That we have unrestricted. Pretty normal with water utilities is actually on the lower end, but you can see here in December of 2014, took a little dip because we had some outlays of some things that partly timing, because what we'll do with capital projects a lot of times is we'll pay them out and then reimburse ourselves through the capital fund or the project fund. So it happened to be that year we had a little drop, but we continue to stay on top. As a rule, we generally like to pull in the money from the capital funds or the project funds before we pay out.
That Bruce fund is getting big,
Yeah, I know.
you know?
Used to be the chairman's fund, I
That
think.
Bruce Reserve Fund.
I noticed that.
Build a clubhouse.
I noticed that after you had that big dip,
Recovered.
right,
Right.
recovered. My guess would be you probably paid out some money, and when you got it back, you got it
Paid
back.
it.
Reimbursing, yeah.
That's probably the Christmas present.
Again, this is really, this
I
is,
told him, I understand charts, I don't understand lists of numbers, so that's okay.
I would mention that we just had our bonding reviews, or the rating agency reviews, and this really helped us out in our rating overall. Not only this, but like you mentioned, our repair and improvement fund and those reserve funds that are an additional security for the bondholders. And the rating agencies were very impressed with the fact that we were able to build this up over time, and that's really helped us out overall in our rating. So hopefully we'll continue doing that.
This is in addition to the reserve accounts, correct?
Yes.
Because the
yes.
reserve accounts are
We
restricted.
have approximately 17 million when you add in all the reserve accounts.
Yeah.
So they were very pleased with that.
Cash flow years ago, when you were borrowing money to pay for bills, this is the sort of thing you want to do, is to build your cash, so you don't have to borrow to pay the bills.
Really, you don't keep people employed, Bruce, when you don't borrow.
Borrow, okay. Sorry.
That's right. So along the same lines, Bruce had asked about the 2015 bonds. What were the overall savings as a result of, we had refunded the 2006 and the 2008 bonds I had mentioned before. We refunded 9.8 million of the 2008 bonds and 10.2 million of the 2006 bonds. So that's $20 million that we refunded. Our present value savings over the life, 20 years, is 2.2 million. That's approximately about 110,000 per year. There's a high of 150, goes down to about 30,000 later on.
Yeah, and they always done through interest rate, right, adjustment?
Yeah,
We
I mean,
didn't change the terms on it as far as the amortization.
No, what's outstanding is, yeah, it's just over the same life, right? And as Pat's probably gonna mention with our most recent bonding, just a comparison, there was $4.7 million of 2006 bonds that we just refinanced. And the present value savings off of those is $720,000. That's about $35,000 a year. So,
Thank God, not gonna last.
some good facts.
Well,
You know, though,
it's gotta last for 20 years.
Well, that- I'm
if
saying
we're-
in the
if we're
future.
budgeting on those numbers, right? And the plan already accounts for that. Do we take that excess that we've already been put in and take that excess and put it into the unrestricted account?
Well,
Since we've already budgeted for it?
in the case of last year, remember, we refunded those bonds in November. We had already done the budget for the
Okay,
next year, so we didn't take that into account.
okay.
Obviously, what's happened this year, we're going to take into account for next year's budget. So we obviously see those savings, absolutely.
Essentially, what we've used in the past is whenever we can achieve those kind of savings, you know, we've kind of roughly translated that into budget relief, rate relief in the
Yeah.
future. So, you know, with the bond issue that we're closing on this week, and Jim mentioned 35, it's between $35,000 and $40,000 each year for the rest of that debt. That translates into about a quarter of a point on the rate scale that you know, can be used to offset something else that might be increasing.
That's not gonna change your rate too much,
No.
though, is it?
No, it won't. I mean, one way or the other, you know, other things going up. So all this does is we use the savings to offset something else that's going up.
Because what I was thinking about was you couldn't just take the money and keep it in like a surplus fund or something to, you know, like you're building equity here, or it's not good business to do that.
Well, what happens is with the bonds that we just got done selling, that'll close this week, we'll pay off those old bonds. So now we have brand new debt
Yeah.
at a lower level,
Yeah.
paying off that old debt. So essentially, we're just gonna be funding less year by year.
Oh,
We have to send to the trustee.
Yeah.
Every year we send money down to the Bank of New York and they pay the bonds. So now we just send them less.
Yeah,
So that's
I
all.
got you.
Was there anything else?
Yes, we got two other things, they're really complicated.
That was leaving the complicated.
So this past year, 2015, there was a new pronouncement. There's a body called GASB. Ever heard of the term GASB? Government Accounting Standards Board. They're a body of, I think, 7. They're like the Supreme Court justices. They come through with all these new pronouncements. So we had to start recording our pension liability this past year. So we've been paying a premium every December to the state retirement system, which is called the Employees Retirement System. That's the one we're involved in. You probably heard of police and fire. There's 2 different retirement systems. We paid a premium of $878,000. That's actually down from $1 million the previous year. But through all their calculations, they actually have actuaries that the state hires, and they come up with a liability that we have.
This is quite a bit higher than it used to be,
Oh, yes.
and the market's
Yes.
now improving.
Right, that's
Yeah.
probably.
So what's going on in Albany that's causing
They're
this?
requiring you, before they had a minimum threshold that they would require, or they didn't have a minimum threshold before. So I remember back in 2001, 2002, it was like $30,000 premium.
You know,
Now it's 4%, it's probably gonna be higher as a minimum. So that's why we've, over the years, just increased and increased year after year.
They weren't building our future liabilities
I know,
into it.
so you're saying that all of these state retirement fund organizations, municipalities, et cetera, are still gonna have to pay this kind
Yeah.
of fee?
Yeah,
Even
we're actually-
Even though the state retirement fund is supposed to be under good management,
Right.
and we're still increasing the amount of money.
Yeah, so
It's
if
really-
the investment rates on those change and they go up, you get a better return, their number should come down.
It comes down, and that's
I mean,
why,
the
that's
only-
partly
there's two-
why it's come down from
Right.
$1 million to the
I mean, there's 2 things that impact it.
$878,000.
Number one are the payouts because of the retirements.
It's the 3-legged stool. It's the employer contributions, investments, employee contribution. So they determined actuarially that our liability was $562,000. So we actually have to record that on our books, and we did this past year. That happens to be, and we recorded $512,000 as an expense for this year, even though our premium was paid at $878,000. So there's a calculation that you have to go through. We actually get this from the state. Shows what our liability is, and there's other factors that go into it. So that's a
You
new
take it all in the
liability.
same year?
Pardon me?
You have to take that deduction
Yeah.
all in the same year?
Yeah. The valuation is March 31st, which is the state's year. So they do this valuation every March, and everyone gets it. In fact, of the total liability, which was, it's in our notes, it's like $278 million is the state's liability. We are 0.0166503% of that total liability. So that's really fun.
Yeah.
Back in 2009,
Don't go for it.
another GASB came about. It was the retiree health insurance. So we had to start recording that. And so every year, every 2 years, we have a full valuation done by an actuary. This past year, they calculated it at $4.4 million. That's what's called the actuarial accrued liability, or the AAL. Of that, we have a retired contribution that's calculated each year. That's $278,000. If our premiums that we pay are above or below that, the liability, the net the net OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefit liability that we have to record, it's currently at $2.9 million. So over the years, whether we're up or down, plus interest and other things that they calculate into that calculation, we have to record 2.9 million, so we have that on our balance sheet as well.
Does that number change?
That will change, yes. It actually has gone down. So that 278,000 is more or less the expense that we're going to incur every year. But as time goes on, people live longer. They show in the actuarial report, it goes from 278,000 to 360, 380,000.
Our future liabilities, if you think about the numbers that we've been talking about, we're talking about this upcoming budget and how much we may or may not be able to save on the bonding, so we don't have to hit the rate or be able to do more or less depending on how much money was available. And then we're looking at the retirement. The dollar amount is over 4% on the rate is what we're paying, and that has gone up significantly over the last 10 years. And now with the health insurance, that affects mostly our balance sheet, dollars that may or may not be available elsewhere, but it's still related to our negotiations and how health insurance, because we don't have control of retirement, but we do have control of health insurance. So those are the decisions you guys make, and knowing the impact of it helps us make those types of decisions, not necessarily for this year. What this board has done very well, and I mean, I like serving on this board because it does do that. We look to the future very well. We're always looking 15 to 25 years in the future on almost everything that we're doing and spending, unlike local governments that only care about what's going to happen in the next election. And that has resulted in very, very high tax implications over the years, whereas you folks have really controlled the cost to the consumer of water, taking this stuff into consideration. I mean, you got to be very proud of the work that you're doing because you're always thinking that far in advance. I think that's a real service to our community, and this type of information helps you make those decisions.
Does GASB apply to other than municipalities, not-for-profits?
No, they have their own standards.
The G is government.
They have FASB.
Yeah, that's right. They have FASB.
Yeah, and for-profits.
Any other good
There's
news you got
nonprofit
over there, Jim?
nuances.
This is
No.
good. This is actually pretty good news.
If you want- Yeah, something more complicated, bring them my way.
He was worried about that one.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anything else?
No, that was it. I was just,
We understand it.
it came up in reading the budget. The only thing is, whenever you're reading the budget, Jim's really good at bringing back the information. Well, I just sent him an email and to Pat and said, can we get some explanations for me and the board, and which is what they've done. So I thank you very much for that.
Executive Director, Capital Committee, we already did. Your report, Pat?
Yeah, so Jim and I have an interesting dynamic because he gets to present all the bad news and I save the good news for myself. So after all that talk about liabilities, no, we do have actually some fun stuff to talk about. But very quickly, I just want to also remind you that we are currently in the process of drafting our budget proposal and budget package to be back in departments by the end of next week.
Today.
Today? Oh, I'm a week off.
Yeah,
I
today.
lost a week with the bonding process. That's what happened.
Still waiting for something.
So we'll be compiling all that internally. Jim and I and Scott will be reviewing it with all of our departments over the next couple of weeks, and we'll be producing our recommended budget for your review. So as we head into September, we'll be setting up the workshop schedule so you can review the budget. We'll get all that information out to you, review it carefully, and answer all your questions, and allow ourselves hopefully a good 60 days or longer to be able to work through it and produce a budget by our deadline of October 31st. Second thing I wanted to mention is that we did meet the deadline for submitting an application for funding for the Regional Development Council funding that is now what they call the consolidated funding process. All state monies, with a few rare exceptions, now funnel through this one process, and it's a 6-county collaboration effort. We did put one in. The project we proposed would be phase 2 of the raw water line that would go from the treatment plant back to Hinkley Reservoir, increasing the size of that line for more capacity and more protection against lower water levels and such. So phase 1 of that project we're funding right now via the request that this board passed to the Water Finance Authority, our borrowing arm organization. The money that we're obtaining is going to do the first phase of that project, which will start right at the treatment plant. And then phase 2 and phase 3, the timing of which may be somewhat dependent on whether or not we get more interest at the Nano Center site. But we thought as long as we have a project that we can propose, they'll cover up to 20%, so we could get a couple $1 million out of that if they approve it, which at that point would mean, maybe we want to move ahead with the second phase as long as we're going to get that money. That's something that we hope to have, that kind of a problem that we have to figure out. So we'll see. Last thing I want to mention is, Jim touched on it, we just got done pricing the bonds, the 2016 bonds that we've been working on very diligently. Jim and Scott and I, and in some cases Dick, have been buried on conference calls for the last several weeks with our consultants. It's roughly a little over $9 million, including the closing costs. The actual proceeds are about 8.7 something, and that's going to do two things. It's going to refund a portion of the remaining 2006 bonds, and then give us roughly $4.5 million or so to fund the first phase of this raw water line. I'll just talk a little louder. But I want to just pass this along. There's a couple things I want to review with you. So if you could each take one of these documents. And then what I want to go over for you is, first and foremost, because the rates are so low, the yields on all these bonds, even going out over 30 years, are under 3%. In the first few years, they're between 0.5% and 0.8%. Rates are extraordinarily low right now, so the pricing went very well. And essentially what happens is that our underwriters, which is Jefferies, which used to be First Albany, moves these bonds to market. Process generally takes us between 45 and 60 days to put together. And something that came up very late in the process, really only about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago, I received a phone call one day from our financial advisor in New York City, Rick McCarthy, who heads his own company, Environmental Capital. Rick called me up to let me know that Moody's Investors Service, which is one of the agencies that we go to for our bond rating, is breaking into the market of issuing green bond assessments. What that means is that if your bonds are being used for a project that can be deemed to have some environmental benefit, then they would be rated as a green bond, with green bond 1 being the highest rating, green bond 5 being sort of the lowest rating, less green, if you will. And they're just trying to get into this market in the United States. They've issued 3 green bond ratings in Europe, but they had issued none in the United States. Now, there are other green bonds labeled as such in the US, rated by other agencies, but not by Moody's. This is something that they're just getting into now. So Rick McCarthy proposed that because of the nature of this project, we might want to take a look at this process and see how we could fare in that. Typically, they have a fairly healthy fee that they charge for that. They were willing to waive that fee entirely for us because we would conceivably be the first ones in the country. And so at no additional cost, we spent, other than our time, several hours on the phone with the Moody's division chief who's heading up this new section. Went through the application process and favored, or I would say was viewed very favorably by them. And so, as you can see, both with the press release and the article that appeared in the Bond Buyer, which I've handed out, they did in fact assign a green bond rating. They gave it the highest rating of Green Bond Assessment 1, and we are now in a very distinct position of having earned the first green bond rating in the United States by Moody's Investors. And
Do we have a green project?
Pardon?
Do we have a, what's all?
We do, and the explanation and what they based that on was the fact that the project that we're doing with the first phase of the new raw water line, we're replacing a 1905 24-inch diameter pipe with a much larger one. The first section is going to be 48-inch diameter only because of the challenge of getting it from the plant over to the other side of where it goes underground. But the rest of that pipe will be a 54-inch diameter pipe that will be capable of carrying virtually all of our water needs. Now the other line that's in place that was built in the 1950s is a 36-inch diameter pipe. That's going to stay there. So we'll still have 2 pipes, but instead of a 36 and a 24, well, the 36 and the 54. But what that means for us, not only can we convey more water when we need it, if another microchip plant comes, but it will also allow us to be able to get all the water we need, even if there's a severe drought and the Hinckley Reservoir gets abnormally low. Right now, if it gets below roughly 1195 elevation, which is about 30 feet from the top of the dam, which is about halfway down, we would then get very concerned because we begin to lose downward hydraulic pressure from the reservoir that actually pushes the water through the treatment plant. And with the Nano Center site that's going to be coming on, AMS Corporation, and Quad C, when they get up and running, we'll be running roughly 3 million gallons a day higher or so, or 2.5 million gallons a day than we are now. That 1195 elevation becomes a pretty critical thing for us to watch. But as we begin to enlarge that line back to the plant, we lose less pressure through it. And so what this project would do is essentially increase our system resiliency. It will make our water resource much more sustainable in the face of a drought. And that was viewed very favorably as a green project for the purposes of this. And so translating that into pricing, Jeffries, our underwriters, again, as I mentioned, used to be called First Albany Corp. They're the ones that actually bring these bonds to market. They did say that it attracted an additional investment pool that is an actual green bond buying pool. And unfortunately, it didn't attract enough green bond buyers that the competition had a significant pricing difference on the bonds. But as they moved these things to market, they did pick up about 10 basis points, which is roughly 0.1% of 1% on the yield because of the competition. So there was maybe a small favorable outcome on the pricing, but certainly the awareness of this going out over the wire, as you can see from that article, got us some discussion within the bond market, and it did bring some new investors to take a look at our bonds. So I think it worked very favorably for us. And as you can see in some of the language, they also noted that they felt that our management here was strong and that we do plan ahead, just as Bruce said. Last thing I'll mention is that both Moody's credit rating, the credit rating side of them, and Standard & Poor's, while they did not give us a bond rating increase, which we were pushing for, they did maintain our credit ratings at the same, but did express language that the region is poised for growth, that we certainly are looking forward to better times ahead. I think once we start seeing some of that additional water use and our numbers actually start changing, we'll see another bond rating increase. But for now, we remain as an A1 with Moody's, as an A+ with Standard & Poor's. But the outlook is stable, and again, even in there was some strong language about fiscal conservative management playing a good part. Our very high liquidity of $17 million backing up our debt was another notable factor. So I think we fared very well in this process. And,
Do they give you any feedback as to how, why they would increase the rating? I mean, what do we have to do to get the rating?
Yes.
Yeah, in both, in fact, I have that.
Yeah, I have it.
I have it right in front of me. They do say things that could increase it, things that could decrease it. This one from S&P. Factors that could increase it. Essentially, higher water use, maybe slightly lower debt. But in both cases, they're looking towards expanding, our water use. And they know that there's a signed contract with AMS. They know that the plant is going to be going up. It's going to be built. The building's going to be under construction shortly. And once that water use starts happening, I think that's when we're going to see that they're going to say, okay, you've hit the barometer that we're looking for. They just don't want to give it to us too early.
And Moody's here.
Yeah.
Factors that could lead to upgrade: increased debt service coverage and system liquidity, improved service area demographics. Factors that could lead to downgrade: significant leveraging of system, substantial declines in coverage and liquidity.
Right.
And we've never had, we've always met debt service coverage covenants, and you would think even with that reserve, that unrestricted account, that's got to be a plus too. It's got, maybe they're leaning more towards the consumption.
Yeah, I think if we go up, because there was a concern over time because it was going down
Right.
for so many years, now that it's turned the other way and potentially
When the AMS plant comes online, at full production, they'll be using between 1.5 million and 2 million gallons a day. Roughly on our rate schedule, that would translate into about $1.5 million of revenue without really very much corresponding expense. At that point, the debt service ratios that they've cited here will begin to change. So,
That's still targeted for 2017 first quarter?
there's a slight delay only because some things in Albany held up a little bit of the money, but the money has now been freed up and is flowing to the site through Fort Schuyler Management Corporation based in Albany. They're the actual site developers. Right now, it looks like probably they will be moving product out the door by the third or fourth quarter of 2018. The tooling of the plant, instead of happening in the last quarter of 2017, it will probably start tooling up in the first and second quarters of 2018. So we may be roughly 6 months behind schedule. Although I know that they'll be looking for ways to try to make that time up as the project proceeds, so who knows? Yeah.
Question.
Yes, sir.
I guess that man right there.
I'm still here.
We talked about, I might not be correct on my figures, but the one near, the pipe nearest the plant was gonna be, let's say, 48
48 inches. It's across on the bridge.
Right.
We reduced the
And then
size.
we're gonna go back to 36 and then go back to 2 feet or something like that toward the dam.
The new pipe will be 54 inch, so it'll be 4-foot pipe to a 4.5-foot diameter pipe, all the way to the dam. Yeah.
Because that, I don't have the diameters correct. But my knowledge of something like that is that you should always go from larger to smaller to create, you're certainly aware of who Pete Gorham is. Pete Gorham? Yeah, you know who he is.
Not ringing a bell.
No? And he ran in gravity water to his farm from a hill, and he went from...
Pete Gorham in Poland.
Poland, yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about environmental scientists.
No.
Bernoulli or somebody like that.
And I know where...
Yeah, sure.
I know where you're from.
Yeah.
Where he went from 1 1/4 inch to 3/4 and created a tremendous amount of pressure because he was kind of continually going smaller. And I think, I don't have any problem with the size of the pipe, but I think you should go from larger to smaller. In other words, if you go from smaller to larger, you're not going to create as much pressure as you would from larger to smaller. And that's why I'm talking.
He may have
to you
had
because you're an engineer.
connections off the line. Because we don't have any connections between the source and the plant, there's no reason to change sizes. And that's more applicable in open channel flow. We're looking at pressure flow.
Oh, there is
here.
pressure there.
Yeah, due to the reservoir.
think
And
the
the larger the
confusion-
pipe, another benefit of this larger pipe is we'll be much more efficient in terms of delivery to our hydro turbine. We'll actually generate more electricity. That's another environmental green benefit.
So you think it'll work from an, because I know you're an engineer, it'll work from an engineering standpoint. That's why I turned
But-
right to
Yep,
you.
absolutely.
The other way to look at it is this, so if you imagine a fire hydrant and fire nearby, you know, when they're running off the 6-inch nozzle and they got a wide hose,
Yeah.
they can deliver 500, 800, 900 gallons a minute on the fire. If you were to restrict that all the way down to a garden hose, you'd have great pressure, it'd be blasting out. You know, just like if you're washing your driveway with something that's a pinhole, you can develop a lot of PSI that'll punch right through something, but the quantity isn't there. So
Okay.
if you ran a garden hose off a hydrant, you're not gonna get 800 gallons a minute through. So that's why we go with a larger pipe, we need the quantity over the pressure.
Okay.
Anything else, Pep?
No.
You sure?
I'm sure.
Any old business?
There was a operations committee meeting.
Sir,
And,
that wasn't on my list, sir.
We discussed the plan to get a consultant in to do, to look at the IT infrastructure of the Water Authority. And it was agreed to go ahead and do that. I don't know if Jim has gotten any RFPs developed yet, I haven't seen them.
I was working on it, quite frankly, between the bonding,
Okay.
I haven't had much of a chance to sit down with him yet.
So that's the next step. We're going to see an RFP from the IT department to go out to qualified firms for consulting only.
Great. Any questions for Frank?
Are you looking at the efficiency or the organization structure?
Everything.
Okay.
Needs assessment and
Good.
impact analysis.
Yeah, one of the, which I think is a great move by the committee, moving in that direction to get somebody to help give us advice that's not selling us something.
Strictly consulting.
Anybody else? Any new business? We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening.